My sister banished my girlfriend from her own wedding. The choice I made has left my entire family in uncomfortable silence. 3 weeks before my sister's wedding, my phone lit up with a message that, at first glance, seemed harmless. But as soon as my eyes traced the words, I felt something inside me tighten. "You can come," it read, "but not with her." I blinked, thinking maybe I'd misunderstood. But no, it was clear. Her meant Emily. My Emily. The woman who had been my constant for the past 2 years. The one who'd seen me through my lowest moments and celebrated my victories like they were her own. I stared at the screen, my mind scrambling for explanations. I knew they'd argued months ago, though neither of them had ever given me the full story. From what little I'd pieced together, it started as something small, a disagreement at a family dinner. But it escalated into a full-blown fight that left both of them cold toward each other. I'd hoped time would soften the edges. Clearly, it hadn't. At first, I felt disbelief. This was my sister's wedding, a day meant to be about love and unity. Was she really asking me to attend without the person I loved most? Then came anger, the kind that prickles at your skin and makes your jaw clench. Who was she to dictate who I could bring? But beneath the anger was confusion, and beneath the confusion, fear. The wedding was 21 days away, and suddenly, the clock felt like a ticking bomb. Each second that passed was a reminder that I had to make a choice. And no matter which way I turned, I could already feel the weight of loss pressing in. Go without Emily, and I'd betray her, betray us. Refuse to go, and I'd fracture something in my family that might never be repaired. I set my phone down, but the words stayed burned in my mind. I had no idea then just how much those 2 short sentences would unravel me over the coming weeks. I tried to pretend the message didn't matter, at least for the rest of that evening. I made dinner like nothing had happened, stirred the pasta absent-mindedly, set the table the way I always did. But the weight of those words pressed on my chest, a constant, invisible hand. When Emily walked in from work, her cheeks flushed from the cold, I almost blurted it out immediately. Instead, I hugged her first, holding on just a second longer than usual. Over dinner, the silence grew heavier. She noticed, of course she did. Emily has this way of reading me, of catching the smallest shift in my voice or my expression. I finally told her, my words slow and cautious like I was testing the air. I expected outrage, maybe tears, or at the very least, sharp disbelief. But she just sat there for a moment, fork resting against her plate, eyes locked on mine. "If you want to go without me," she said softly, "I'll understand." Her calmness cut deeper than any argument could have. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How she could be so willing to step aside when my own sister had drawn a line so firmly. Was it strength? Or was it the quiet acceptance of someone used to being left out? The thought gnawed at me. I nodded, but inside, my mind screamed. I didn't want to go without her. But I also didn't want to miss my sister's wedding, the first big family event since Dad's funeral 2 years ago. The thought of being absent from those photos, those memories, felt wrong. And yet, so did the thought of Emily sitting at home while I smiled for the camera. After Emily went to bed, I sat alone on the couch, phone in my hand, scrolling through old photos of the two of us. Every smile, every shared look was a reminder of what she meant to me. And as much as I wanted to believe I could find a compromise, deep down I already knew there was no choice that wouldn't hurt. The next morning, I woke up with the uneasy feeling that my phone was watching me. Sure enough, there were 3 new messages, one from my mom, one from my aunt, and one from a cousin I barely spoke to. All of them, in their own polite but pointed ways, repeated the same sentiment. It's her day. Don't make it about you. My aunt's message ended with a passive-aggressive, sometimes we have to swallow our pride for family. I stared at those words, feeling my jaw tighten. Swallow my pride? Was it pride to want the person I loved most to stand beside me on a day like that? Or was it simply a boundary, one my sister was asking me to cross without question? I didn't answer any of them right away. Instead, I put my phone face down on the table and went to make coffee. But even coffee didn't help. My hands shook as I poured the water, and when Emily came into the kitchen, I forced a smile I didn't feel. She didn't ask about the messages. She just kissed my cheek and poured herself a cup, as if she knew I was already drowning in other people's opinions. On my way to work, I bought a pack of cigarettes for the first time in nearly 3 years. I stood outside the convenience store, the cold wind biting at my face, and lit one with a hand that wasn't as steady as I wanted it to be. The smoke filled my lungs, warm and familiar in a way I hated to admit. It wasn't a solution, but it was a pause, a brief moment where the weight in my chest felt lighter. By lunch, I made it through 2 cigarettes and a dozen scenarios in my head. In sum, I went to the wedding alone, plastering on a smile and pretending everything was fine. In others, I stayed home with Emily, both of us wrapped in a silence that felt like defiance. Every version ended with someone hurt, and no matter how I turned it, I couldn't find one where I didn't lose something important. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the faint hum of the heater filling the silence. Emily's breathing beside me was steady, peaceful, like she had made her peace with this whole situation already. I envied her for that. Every time I closed my eyes, my brain replayed the same scenes. Me walking into the church without her, me sitting alone at the reception table, my sister avoiding my gaze. Then the scene would shift, and I'd picture Emily sitting on the couch at home, dressed in something nice, waiting for me to come back and tell her about a wedding she wasn't welcome at. Both visions felt like betrayals. At some point, I drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep. I dreamed about Dad's funeral 2 years ago. Emily had been there, standing right beside me while my sister cried quietly a few rows over. Back then, we were united in grief. It was one of those moments in life when you realize who will truly stand beside you no matter what. And now, I couldn't stop thinking about how quickly those bonds could fray. The next day, I tried to distract myself by burying my head in work, but it didn't stick. My manager caught me zoning out twice. I lied, saying I hadn't slept well. In truth, it was more than a bad night. It was the constant, gnawing knowledge that this wasn't going to resolve itself. My sister wasn't going to suddenly change her mind, and I wasn't going to magically feel okay about either choice. By evening, I was outside again, cigarette in hand, watching the smoke twist and curl into the night air. I thought about calling my sister, just to hear her side one more time. Maybe there was something I was missing. But my gut told me there wasn't. She'd made her decision, and she expected me to fall in line. That was the part one couldn't stomach. The days started to blur together, each one a countdown I couldn't stop watching. 2 weeks and 4 days until the wedding. Then 2 weeks and 2 days. Every morning, the first thing I did was check my phone, half expecting an apology or some kind of truce from my sister. But nothing came. The silence was worse than the original message. It meant she wasn't reconsidering, not even for a moment. One evening, as Emily cooked dinner, I found myself pacing the kitchen, the soles of my shoes making a dull, repetitive sound against the tile. What if I just went for the ceremony? I asked suddenly. Emily turned from the stove, a wooden spoon in her hand. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes softened, but her mouth stayed firm. "If that's what you want to do," she said, "then do it. I won't be upset." It should have been a relief to hear her say it again. Instead, it felt like she was quietly preparing for me to choose my sister over her. That thought twisted in my gut. Later that night, I scrolled through old messages with my sister, going back months before the fight. There were photos of us at family gatherings, texts about stupid jokes we shared, even videos of her trying on wedding dresses and sending them to me for my opinion. Seeing them now was like looking at a version of her I no longer recognized. I lit another cigarette and sat on the back steps, letting the cold seep through my clothes. The neighborhood was quiet except for the faint hum of traffic a few streets over. In that stillness, the reality hit me harder than before. I wasn't just deciding about a wedding. I was deciding what kind of man I was going to be when it came to the people I loved. And whichever way I leaned, something was going to break. By now, it felt like the entire family had weighed in. My phone became a chorus of opinions I never asked for. My mom called again, her voice coated with that careful, measured tone she used when she wanted me to agree without realizing I was agreeing. She reminded me that weddings are once-in-a-lifetime events, and that families should set differences aside for the sake of the bigger picture. My cousin texted me the same afternoon, saying it would be a shame if I skipped the wedding over something so small. Even my grandmother called, her voice frail but her words sharp. It's just one day. Don't ruin things forever. It was almost laughable, the way no one seemed to care about what Emily might feel. They all acted like she was some optional accessory I could leave behind without consequence. But to me, she wasn't optional. She was the person who'd been by my side through everything, the good, the bad, and the moments when I wasn't sure I'd make it through it all. The pressure was relentless. Every conversation left me feeling more trapped, like I was being squeezed into a corner with no way out. I started avoiding calls altogether, letting them go to voicemail. Even when my phone was silent, the words people had said echoed in my head, picking apart my resolve. One night, Emily found me sitting in the dark on the couch, an unlit cigarette between my fingers. "You're wearing yourself down," she said quietly, sitting beside me. I didn't respond. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, all that would come out was frustration, not at her, but at the impossible position I'd been put in. She reached for my hand and held it without speaking. That simple gesture did more for me than any advice or lecture I'd gotten in the past week. It reminded me that, despite the noise, there was still one person in all of this who was firmly in my corner. With just under 2 weeks left, my sister finally sent another message. It was short, almost clinical in its delivery. "I hope you make the right choice." That was it. No explanation, no attempt to soften the blow, no hint of compromise. Just 7 words that somehow felt heavier than the original demand. I must have read it a dozen times, hoping that if I stared at it long enough, the meaning would change. But it didn't. The right choice in her mind was obvious. Her way, no questions asked. She didn't say it outright, but I could hear the unspoken threat in between the words. "Choose Emily, and you're choosing against me." I typed out a response more than once. In one version, I told her she was being unfair. In another, I tried to reason with her to suggest we could all sit down and work things out. But every draft ended up in the trash. I knew her well enough to realize she'd already made up her mind. That evening, I stepped outside for another cigarette. The winter air bit at my fingers, the smoke curling lazily upward as I leaned against the railing. I thought about every moment we'd shared growing up, birthday parties, late-night talks, secrets traded under blankets during thunderstorms. How could all of that lead to this? When I came back inside, Emily was curled up on the couch reading. She looked up and smiled at me, but there was a trace of something in her eyes, a question she wasn't asking out loud. I sat down beside her and pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like we both knew this was the calm before the storm. The days were moving too fast, and I was no closer to a decision. But deep down, a part of me was starting to realize that maybe the decision had already been made. I just hadn't admitted it yet. The tension in the house was almost suffocating. Each morning, I woke up feeling like I was walking on a tightrope stretched thin over a bottomless pit. I was on edge all day, quick to snap, slow to smile. Emily never complained, but I could see it in the quiet way she avoided meeting my eyes when I was frustrated. I hated putting that strain on her, but the pressure was crushing me. Work became another battleground. My concentration slipped, and my manager pulled me aside, concerned. "You're distracted," she said gently. "Is everything okay?" I forced a smile and shook my head, muttering something about stress. Truth was, I was worried that if I let anyone in on what was really going on, it might all come crashing down faster. Friends reached out too, inviting me to hang out, to take my mind off things. But I declined every time, not because I wanted to hide, but because the thought of pretending to be fine felt unbearable. The wedding was looming, and every second brought me closer to a breaking point. At night, I found myself pacing the living room, smoking one cigarette after another. The nicotine was a poor substitute for the calm I craved, but it was all I had. I thought about calling my sister, maybe just to hear her voice, to try and bridge the silence. But the fear of rejection stopped me every time. Emily stayed by my side through it all, silent and steady. One evening, she pulled me down beside her on the couch and held me tight. I closed my eyes, letting her warmth anchor me for a moment. In that instant, the noise outside faded. The family drama, the wedding, the impossible choices, and all that mattered was that she was there. But even that moment of peace was fragile, because I knew the hardest days were still ahead. Every morning, I woke with the same gnawing question: which loss can I live with? My sister's cold silence or Emily's quiet heartbreak? It was like standing at a crossroads where both paths promised pain. The days crawled by, the wedding drawing closer with an almost cruel inevitability. I kept replaying memories of better times. Laughter shared over cups of coffee, secret jokes whispered in the dark, moments when the three of us seemed like one unbreakable unit. But those days felt like distant echoes now, overshadowed by the growing rift. One afternoon, I found myself alone in the park, watching children chase each other beneath the pale sun. I thought about how simple things had once been, how love had felt uncomplicated. Now, every choice was a battle, every word weighed down by consequences. My phone buzzed with another message from my sister, a photo of her and her fiancé, smiling, the caption reading, "Counting down the days." The image should have made me happy. Instead, it stabbed at my chest like a reminder that I was becoming an outsider in what should have been a joyous occasion. That night, Emily sat beside me, her hand in mine. We didn't speak about the wedding or my sister's message. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. And in that quiet, I found a flicker of certainty. No matter what happened, I wanted to stand by her. But the question remained, was standing by her worth the price I'd have to pay? Update 1. 2 days before the wedding, the tension in my chest felt like a vice tightening by the hour. The room seemed smaller, the walls closing in, as if the very air I breathed was charged with silent demands and unspoken accusations. Emily sat quietly across from me, her eyes calm but distant, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. She had said more than once that if I chose to go without her, she wouldn't hold it against me. But those words, spoken with quiet grace, were a double-edged sword. Was she really okay with it? Or was it a shield protecting me from the pain she refused to show? I watched her carefully, searching for a crack in that calm facade, but found none. My phone buzzed with messages from family, reminders, instructions, veiled pressures. My mom's voice lingered in my head, urging me to make the right choice and not ruin the celebration. The weight of their expectations pressed down harder than ever. I wanted to be there, to stand beside my sister on her biggest day, to see her smile and feel the warmth of family around us. But the thought of doing it without Emily twisted like a knife in my gut. How could I celebrate love when part of my heart was aching? That evening, I took a long walk to clear my head, cigarette in hand, the cold biting through my coat. The city was quiet, but my mind was loud, filled with doubts, fears, and the relentless question, what am I willing to sacrifice? Back home, Emily waited without asking for answers. I sat beside her and let silence speak for both of us. In that quiet, I felt the full weight of what was coming. I was standing at a crossroads, and whichever way I turned, someone would get hurt. The morning of the day after my walk arrived with a gray sky, heavy and low, as if the clouds themselves were weighed down by the same burdens I carried. I woke up feeling restless, the kind of restless that gnaws at your insides and steals your breath. Emily was already awake when I stumbled into the kitchen, making coffee with her usual calm precision. I tried to speak, but the words tangled up inside me. Instead, I told her I might go to the wedding alone. Her eyes flickered, a mix of sadness, acceptance, and something like resignation. She didn't say a word against it. "If that's what you want," she said softly, "I'll support you." That support felt like a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was a gift, the freedom to make my choice without guilt. On the other, it was a reminder that the choice itself was tearing us apart. The silence stretched between us, heavy and aching, but neither of us wanted to break it. I spent the day pacing between hope and dread. I imagined myself walking into that church, alone, trying to wear a mask of happiness while my heart screamed in protest. I pictured Emily sitting at home, maybe scrolling through her phone, wondering if I was thinking about her. The image made my throat tighten. That evening, I called my best friend and left a voice message, a simple, broken confession that I didn't know what to do. There was no reply, just a quiet echo of my own uncertainty. Later, as I sat on the balcony smoking my last cigarette of the day, I looked up at the stars, struggling to peek through the clouds. I realized then that this wasn't just about a wedding. It was about what kind of person I wanted to be, and that realization scared me more than anything else. That night, the weight of the choice settled like a stone in my stomach. I lay awake long after Emily had fallen asleep beside me, staring at the ceiling, the room swallowed in darkness. Every scenario I played in my mind ended the same way. Someone hurt, someone lost, and me trapped between two worlds that refused to meet. I thought about my sister, her smile, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about the wedding, the countless hours she'd spent planning every detail. I knew this day was important to her, maybe the most important day of her life. But at what cost? Could love for family demand so much? Then there was Emily, the woman who'd been my rock through every challenge, who loved me for all my flaws and fears. How could I walk into that church without her, knowing she'd be left behind, standing outside the circle of celebration? It felt like betrayal, like erasing a part of myself. With trembling hands, I typed a message to my sister. "I'm sorry. I can't come without her." I stared at the words, hesitant to send them. But I knew this was the moment of truth, the line I couldn't cross. I pressed send and immediately felt a strange mix of relief and dread. The phone slipped from my hand onto the bed, and I sat there, silent and empty, waiting for a response that didn't come. Emily stirred beside me, and I reached out to hold her hand. In that simple touch, I found a sliver of peace amidst the chaos. Whatever came next, I knew I'd chosen the path that felt right, even if it meant walking it alone. Update 2. It had been a week since the wedding, the one I didn't attend. The silence from my sister was deafening. No calls, no texts, no signs that she even acknowledged I existed anymore. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, only to fall again when it wasn't her. My mom's voice had cooled too, laced with a distant formality instead of the warmth I once knew. Even my aunt, who used to be my biggest supporter, barely replied to messages now. The house felt emptier, colder somehow. Family dinners became a thing of the past, replaced by quiet evenings with just Emily and me. The absence of my sister was like a phantom limb, a space that should have been filled but wasn't. Despite the distance, Emily never mentioned the wedding or the fallout. Sometimes I caught her looking at me with that quiet gratitude, the kind that says she knows I made a hard choice and that she's proud I stood by her. Her presence was a balm to the wounds the family silence had left behind. Still, I wrestled with the sting of loss. The family I'd known, the bonds I thought were unbreakable, now felt fragile and distant. But deep down, I knew I didn't regret my decision. Standing by Emily meant everything to me, even if it meant losing part of my family in the process. I told myself that maybe, with time, the walls would come down. Maybe my sister would see that love isn't about ultimatums, but about understanding. Until then, I was ready to face the silence, holding on to what mattered most. Days passed, each one dragging with the weight of unresolved silence. The phone remained quiet, no outreach from my sister, no attempt to bridge the growing gap. Our family group chat became a ghost town for me. Messages about trivial things, but never about us. I could almost feel the cold distance stretching like a chasm that neither side wanted to cross. Emily and I found solace in the quiet moments between us. She was my anchor, the steady presence that reminded me what loyalty and love truly meant. She never pressed me to fix what was broken with my family. Instead, she simply held my hand and listened when the silence became too loud. At times, loneliness crept in, a sharp reminder that choosing love sometimes comes with painful sacrifices. I missed the days when family dinners were filled with laughter, when my sister and I could share a joke without the weight of unspoken grudges. Yet, I knew some battles were worth fighting with unwavering conviction. Every now and then, I found myself staring at the phone, hoping for a message, a sign, something to mend the divide. But each time, the screen remained dark, reflecting the distance that had grown between us. Still, I didn't regret my choice. I was learning that sometimes love demands difficult sacrifices, and that standing by the person who truly stands by you is worth more than all the empty words of family ties strained by pride and hurt. Sitting alone one evening, I reflected on everything that had unfolded in these past weeks. The silence from my sister and family felt like a wound, raw and aching, but it was also a lesson in what it means to truly love someone. Choosing Emily over attending the wedding wasn't just a decision about one day. It was a statement about loyalty, about standing firm even when the easy path was to give in. I knew I had lost something precious in my family, but I also gained something far greater: integrity and a relationship built on honesty and trust. There were moments when doubt crept in, whispers questioning if I had made a mistake. But whenever those doubts surfaced, I looked at Emily, her steady presence, her unwavering support, and I knew I had done the right thing. Maybe, with time, the wounds will heal. Maybe my sister will come to understand that love isn't about ultimatums or control. But until then, I will carry this choice with me, proud of the man I am when I stand by the people I love most. Love isn't always easy, but it's always worth it.